Joining me now is DeSantis campaign manager, James Uthmeier. Thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So, as I just said, time is running out. Governor DeSantis hoping to break some of the momentum that Nikki Haley has had. We certainly saw a lot of attacks in her direction. Do you think he did what he needed to do tonight to regain that spot as second place to Trump?
Ron DeSantis did exactly what he had to do tonight. He showed up. He's a fighter. We know that, but he's a fighter and he wins. This is yet another debate victory for him. And for him, he wins not just because he's strong and principled. He doesn't waver and give different answers based on what state or audience he's visiting, what day of the week it is. He is principled. He sticks to his guns. And then he has the record of results. He has accomplished everything in Florida he ever said he would do, from school choice to protecting women in the bathroom, protecting children from mutilating surgeries, minors that are going to, suffer from child abuse. He has done everything. He's made Florida the #1 state economy, and he has proven that he's got what it takes to go lead this country and get the job done.
We noticed there were a couple of moments where he declined to directly take aim at the frontrunner, former President Trump. He was critical, but for example, when he was asked if the former president is mentally fit to serve over and over again, he said, we need to find someone younger. We saw a similar approach when he was dealing with the border. Do you think he missed the opportunity to go at the frontrunner more aggressively, as we have seen Chris Christie do?
No, look, I think he answered the question. Some might just not have liked the answer he gave. Does Donald Trump have cognitive function? Yes, he does. But I think the governor was very clear that the country needs a leader who's not going up into the 80s, who's not lost a step. And one thing is clear. Donald Trump is not not the same guy he was 4 or 6 years ago. He has definitely lost a step. The governor said we need a leader who will spit nails, who will fight our enemies, and who will get the job done. A new American leader, a younger person, and he's proven that he can do what needs to be done.
But, James, respectively, I mean, you were just more direct than we heard from the governor tonight on the debate stage. He didn't say what you just said. He said, we need to have somebody younger. I think when you get up to 80, I don't think it's a job for that. He chose his words very carefully. And I guess the question is, just taking a step back, when is he going to take the gloves off? Is it getting too late?
No, look, he has taken the gloves off. He's pointed out the failures of the former president. He's flipped-flopped on many issues. I mean, he recently paraded around a BLM endorsement, the very same BLM that was burning down the streets and cities of our country. So he's changed. He's not the same guy. I think the American public are, they're frustrated that, he did shut much of the country down. He refused to fire Fauci. He refused to fire Christopher Wray. And he was not fiscally responsible. He led to over $7 trillion to the national deficit. So the governor's pointed out policy differences. He doesn't get into the personal attacks, and he's all about going out and talking about his vision for the future. And he was the only candidate on that stage, the only strong conservative that pointed out both the vision, but also backed it up with all of his many accomplishments in Florida. Everything he has ever promised he would do, he did, and then some. No other candidate could do that, especially Nikki Haley, who essentially fell off the stage tonight. It was a very bad night for her. Her inaction in South Carolina is what was highlighted, where Governor DeSantis stepped in and made it illegal for China to purchase land in Florida. Nikki Haley gave away half of her state. She's even caught on tape saying she worked for China. When it came to protecting kids against mutilating transgender surgeries, Ron DeSantis made that unlawful. Nikki Haley, no, she says government needs to stay out of the way.
Well, she's, of course, rejected all of those characterizations you've just laid out, that she worked for China and everything else. But let me ask you big picture.
It's all on tape.
Let me ask you about
TheRealNikki.com, it's there.
Let me ask you about Iowa, because obviously Governor DeSantis has gotten the endorsement of Governor Kim Reynolds, as well as evangelical leader Bob Vander Plaats. But if he does not come in second place, can he continue in this race, or does he need to seriously consider dropping out?
Ron DeSantis is going to win Iowa. He's got the endorsement of Kim Reynolds, which is not just a stamp of approval. She's going around the state explaining to everybody why he is the best man for the job. She's very well liked. She has a lot of credibility with the caucus goers, and we're seeing a lot of success there. Ron DeSantis has over 42 legislative endorsements. He's got the grassroots support, more than twice any other candidate in the race. Over 100 faith leaders cheering his campaign in the state. He has 99 county chairs and just completed a visit to every single one of the 99 counties. His rooms are packed for his speeches. He has over 30,000 signed caucus commit cards. The energy in that state is strong. We're going to spend a lot of time there, and he is going to win that state.
All right, James Uthmeier, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. I know it's a late night there.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.